Hello and welcome to the Send Network podcast. Now, if you haven't discovered us before, we're a digital community for SEM practitioners and it's a way to connect and collaborate. I'm Georgie Green and my guest today is Dr. Tej Samani. Now, Tej is the founder of My Performance Learning. Welcome to the podcast, and we're going to tackle a pretty huge sort of topic today, and I hope it's going to encourage debate and discussion as well, long after you and I have finished our conversation. And what we're looking at is why the SEND system feels broken and what does need to change. But Tej, before we start, what we like to do, we really like to find a little bit about our guests to really understand what took you on this career route. What was how did it start, and what's led you really to where you are today?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me today. So to answer your question, I'll give you the short version. I had the privilege, I'll say it politically correctly, of seeing the inside of 3 schools by the time I was 15, and made the decision that school wasn't right for me. I had been diagnosed with various learning difficulties, spent most of my time outside of the classroom fighting my teachers, and I joke about it now. I spent most of my early years fighting my teachers. I'm now spending my adult life apologizing to them. And then decided to play professional tennis. That was my passion. So I left school at 16, turned professional roughly about a year after, did it for about 4 or 5 years, and was just shocked at the difference between my life in the classroom versus my life as an athlete, and the volume of difference between being coached and not being able to be taught. Lo and behold, Roger and Rafa turned up. So I had a good look in the mirror and thought, okay, let's try something else for a while. And then fell in love with really trying to find an answer to how pupils learn, and more specifically, hard to reach pupils like me who just found learning really difficult. Here I am today.
And it's an interesting one that it's almost as if the thing that you rebelled against the most is the thing that has drawn you back in.
Yeah, big time.
And what do you when did that happen? When did you suddenly think I can be a part of education?
When I was educated on the tennis court, so I was able to learn and acquire a set of skills through my time as a professional athlete at a pace and a frequency that just exceeded anything I'd experienced before, having spent pretty much the reception years through to the early years, right through to secondary school, feeling like I couldn't learn, feeling like I wasn't meant to learn, and really feeling like learning wasn't right for me. And the level of anxiety that I would experience day to day going into school. People talk about good subjects and bad subjects. For me, they're all bad subjects. And within the space of 6 to 8 months, I started really falling in love with learning new skills on the tennis court, partly because I had a dream of becoming world number 1. So when I had that sort of vision change and environment change from school classrooms to tennis courts to training, that was the penny drop moment for me. And it wasn't about the tennis. The tennis was an escape, right? Because for me, I'd much rather play tennis than be in double maths. It was about developing an approach for pupils who were on paper written off, whether they're on the Senko register or whether attendance is below 40-50% or they're going through hell at home. For me, it was about is there a way? Are we missing something? Is there something out there that I could build and create that could get the most hard to reach pupils to double, triple exam results in the shortest space of time? And most importantly, enjoy learning, dare I say it. Because I've never met a happy athlete who's failing. I was happy when I was winning. So in my simplistic athletic mindset, how do we get pupils to win again, irrespective of where they are?
I mean, we're in a situation now where young people go into education, and there are not a set of rules, but there's a curriculum. They have to stick to that. There's a way
Right.
of teaching, and I actually, people who regularly listen to this know I often bring in family and friends or my own experience. But it's quite interesting. My niece wanted to be a teacher, but before she could go into teacher training, she didn't have maths. So she had to have maths. And so she found a retired teacher, lovely teacher down in Cornwall and said, I can't do maths. I want to go into school. And he said, right, now I'm going to teach you. There are 3 different ways we can look at maths. He said, one of them you'll get, 2 of them you won't. And she said it's transformed. It's transformed her life. And how much is what you do, that type of approach, is looking at things saying that there isn't just one way to do it. But I know that there'll be people listening now saying, well, yeah, we know that, but we've got 30-odd children in a class and we can't just teach each one a separate way of doing it.
Yeah. And that's where the sport example falls down, was me and a coach. So I had all the one-to-one attention I needed. But when you've got 30 students in a class, how do you do it? So I found there were 2 absolutes in the early stages of my work. Number one is really redefining how we assess and the data we base our decisions on. So question number 1 I had is, could we really use pupil voice and correlate that to academic attainment? Is that possible? Because more often than not, and this was the big difference I felt from kind of my experience playing sport and then school, is that the number one data point is the individual in the room. And for me, that was the pupil. And then number 2, do we need to teach underperforming, struggling pupils more of what to learn? So if I'm failing math, as you've said, do you need to give me more math? Or would a more empowering approach be to teach them how to learn? And it was those 2 sort of penny drop moments I had that led me down the rabbit hole of 15 years later, having an assessment tool, having a sort of an intervention, a coaching program that really does both of them. And we've assessed 500,000 students now. We've got nearly 60,000 pupils throughout the country through performance learning. And it's not like we've found this sort of magic solution or black box. I don't think that exists. But when a pupil feels listened to and that's captured accurately and the data is fed back constructively to the pupil, this is you, this is how you behave, this is how you feel, most importantly. And they're able to look at a set of core skills that improves their way, just in terms of how they process information, how they manage their time, their sleep, their ability to diffuse stress and anxiety towards tests and exams, without giving them more of what's causing the pain, which is the subject. They open up to the process of learning. And as a result of that, their overwhelm reduces. So if you take the discussion we're talking about today, we can really, from 30,000 feet, say, okay, is the SEND system, it feels broken, but it's not because people don't care. It's, from my perspective, it's a system designed not for the reality we're facing now. We have a nation of really cognitively overloaded students. Yes, but that's a problem we can solve. There are problems we can't, there are problems we can, and I truly believe this is a problem we can solve, and we can solve it scalably and sustainably. So that led me on a mission to be able to say, let's go to the forgotten parts of the country. Let's go to where students who are struggling the most environmentally, socially, economically, and try and turn them around by giving them less work, by showing them how to learn, by showing them how to think. And for me, that's been, if I can call it that, sort of the silver bullet.
So when you go into a school, what are you seeing? What are you seeing right now? What's that focus? I mean, we've got there's a huge amount of young people struggling with anxiety. What's with so many other issues. And I think one of the things I've learned through this as well is that through doing these podcasts, we are much more open now to neurodiversity. We're suddenly understanding so many more, and it's very many different strands. So how do you, when you go in, how are you going to deal with those different strands, those different things that you're seeing?
So this was the fascinating part. When I was doing my early stage research into this, is there a unified common set of patterns amongst the variety and richness of neurodiverse behaviors and non-neurodiverse behaviors? Is there a map here that we could, for some way, be able to just sort of align like that much to say, actually, the patterns are similar for the early years, the primary years, and the secondary years? And the answer to that is yes. So I took 3 key areas. Area number one is how a pupil perceives the environment around them, and there are 8 areas that we look into. Funnily enough, only 2 drive attainment. So we've boiled it down to 2. Number 2, how much does behavior really affect learning? Ever tried to change behavior before? It's difficult, almost impossible, right? And then number 3 is skill set. Are these pupils who, and you asked me a really important question, and I'll answer that in a minute, which is what do we see in schools today? But number 3, how important is skill set? How can we expect a group of students who are already tired, sleep deprived, overwhelmed, be bluntly honest, not really engaging in double math, double science, double geography, and double history on a Monday, to sit there and actually get it and get it in a way that an exam system requires it without teaching them the skills of how to learn? So those 3 truths and sort of pinpoints led me to be able to say, well, step number 1, we can unify the problem by capturing pupil voice and giving them a roadmap to say, this is how you're perceiving yourself. These are the behaviors that are working for you and are not. But most importantly, the silver bullet is these are your gaps in your skill set. And by coaching them on how to learn and improving their skill set, the other 2 automatically improve. We're fixated on changing behavior and changing perception. For me, it's not an impossibility, but good luck. Because the one thing to drive anyone to insanity is trying to change someone else's behavior, right? We've all had it. We've had it with our children. We've had it with, let alone 30 kids in a classroom. So I will say it over and over again, skill set, skill set, skill set, skill set, skill set. What do I see in schools? I see a whole bunch of triggered young people. That's it. And as a result of the triggers, as a result of the anxiety, as a result of, we don't explore how many lessons do we have in the curriculum about how we feel about the lessons in the curriculum. How are we not exploring the relationship we have with our subjects? For me, math was my kryptonite. Forget it.
And so many of us.
Couldn't do it, right? And the level of overwhelm thinking of walking into a maths class was enough for me not to go in there until someone taught me how to learn the maths. And none of these are, my fear is I can come on and it sounds simplistic and it sounds easy. Dare I say it, this isn't a funding problem. This is a directional problem. We need to change the way we are, the timing in which we are assessing and the type of assessment. And I think that's where we've gone wrong.
But we live in a world of data. We live in a world of results. You often hear of a school, they say, oh, this school is failing. Well, in some ways, what does that mean?
May not.
And how do we change? How then do we turn around that perception, of this school is falling, this school is broken. We've back to the same words again. It's broken. But how do we change that perception? Because I know there'll be people listening here now who are, every day, day in, day out, they are incredible, amazing educators. But it's almost as they're swimming through a sea of porridge.
Big time.
So what are your suggestions? What can we do? What can they do?
I think it's really critical we now shift the focus on really trying our best to be able to personalize assessment, and technology enables us to do that now. There is a growing need, and we've seen this with a lot of recent research around how young people today are really going a lot more inwards and focusing less so on creating exam factories and measuring intelligence by one's ability to retain and recall and regurgitate facts in a context which happens once a year. And if that's the case, fine, but we need to be better at preparing them for that before we judge them on how well they do in that context. To really looking at what's driving that individual pupil. And I'll go back to it. Assessing their ability to learn, looking at how overwhelm is affecting them, assessing how they feel about the environment they're learning in. And we can do this quickly. And as a result of that, we end up having a clear roadmap for the pupil to own. Because unless we begin to start to create independent, self-driven learners, we're going to be in what I call this cycle of doom. Because it's too much to ask our teachers who are striving every single day to make a difference, to do it on the scale of the problem we're now facing.
So this is you've made I described it, I think, earlier as an educational entrepreneur. This is your business. So is it a case that people, they can only bring you in if they can afford to bring you in?
Not
How
necessarily.
does that work?
Yeah, so we support loads and loads of schools. I mean, for me, primarily, I started all of this as a research exercise. I was curious. I wanted to find out really why I failed in school. And for me, getting to a point where I had a set of solutions, set of answers to be able to sustain to a degree of scale enabled me to turn this into an enterprise that we could then provide solutions to schools to say what we believe to be affordable is a set of tools and technologies and provisions that really, really look at driving impact and driving results. So I often say this: we're measured. We're as successful as our last school that we work with, and from purely a teaching and learning perspective, being able to connect what I feel has been a gap for so long between pastoral pupil management, safeguarding, really looking after a pupil's mental health and well-being, and bridging the gap between teaching and learning and attainment. And sort of that's where we sit, is to be able to provide this unequivocal evidence now to say how we feel and how a pupil feels directly determines their ability to attain.
And do you think, I know this is something that I know that you've talked about when I'm going to kick straight in now with that, with social media, because um, again, my daughter's 26 years of age. So when she was younger, social media it was all out there, but it was growing, and it was growing like an uncontrollable bushfire. And so I was then suddenly realizing that some of the things that she was seeing online and watching online, a child should never see. And I don't know which way to come at this, because I know that young people learn so much, and there are so many young people who are very isolated, and so certain aspects of social media are their only friend. But how on earth do you get that balance right? And that surely shouldn't there just be a time when when there is no social media, when they just stop? And isn't that the right thing to do when they're just that little bit younger?
Absolutely. I spoke about this the other day. Your point is so critical to the mental health, the relationship building skills of really the next 4 or 5 generations on. Often social media becomes their best friend. Add the AI capability to that, add the rise in AI agents to that, and we've got ourselves a perfect storm. Because more and more, and this is what we've seen, more and more, so the social media is on such a rise now, but specifically platforms that enable social connection. So it's not just about the scrolling anymore. It is about the conversation with the perceived individual behind the content that you're looking at. So, and I think that's, from a social perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a content perspective, yes, it's evolution. I mean, it's a revolution. It's an evolution. From a safeguarding young person mental health, I think it is one of the most dangerous things we are getting into. And I plead for parents out there, and we're all guilty of it. There is a time and a place. And the early years, the developmental years, and we've seen so many memes and videos of you seeing you take the iPad away from the child and the child has a meltdown.
Yeah.
So what I've certainly experienced in schools today, especially in some of the younger years that we work with, is the just heightened state of cortisol and adrenaline very early on. And the switch off comes from what? The scrolling. So when a child you give them the phone and they calm down, they're not calming down. Their nervous systems are going, their brainwave frequencies are increasing. So as a result of that, what do you get? A very hyper individual. You take the stimulus away, all of a sudden, the reaction goes up. So indirectly, what I'm fearing is, are we creating more volatile behaviors? And that's what I'm worried about. So yes, I completely agree with you. There's a time and place for it.
But the other thing is in schools, there is such a pressure in schools for just anything. You just get your homework sent to you on your mobile phone or on your laptop. Everything is sent. Is so you and I are sitting here now. We've got a whole load of bits of paper in front of us. Is that a generational thing? I don't know. but everything is sent. Everything is sent. Via, as I say, via email,
Yep.
via mobile phone. What happened to the good old days of just writing it down in a book?
Mm.
But
Genie's out of the
yeah,
bottle.
yeah, it is out of the
And I
bottle.
think the genie's been out of the bottle for a while.
And I think when we look at young people, young people with so many different, as we go back again, young people with so many different issues, with dyslexia, with ADHD, also, aren't we just we're just stimulating some of these issues. So what do you want to see? How would you, when you go, let's go, say you've gone into a school, you've been called into a school, that you're going to work with some pupils. What's the first thing you do with them when you think of things that, you look at their social media, all the things they're doing on social media?
Pen and paper. So everything we do, I go back to. I mean, even though I have an education platform and we've built several, ultimately, when I'm working with a pupil, whether it's one-to-one or in a group of pupils, it's pen and paper. So timeout zones, social media free zones, morning and evenings, put that thing away and desensitize yourself from it. It's critical now. It's not a matter of just choice anymore. I truly believe, and I don't want to be dramatic here, I think it's now getting to a point of mental health survival. And it's only going to get worse because the system itself is only going to get smarter. AI is evolving at a rate that nothing in human history has ever evolved this quickly. And the gaps are going to close a lot faster. I mean, we've used large language models. We use this day in, day out. If we think they're intelligent now, wait another 3 to 5. And that's the next generation.
Oh gosh, you and I are both because I think a lot of people. I mean, there's so many terms that come from social media. We talk about TikTok brains because we talk about this is young people who don't have an attention span that will
Ability to
last.
read.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know. Soundbite. I mean, did you see the piece a couple of weeks ago? Swiping the books.
Yes, it's just
Jaw-dropping.
yeah.
Absolutely jaw-dropping. Am I surprised? No. Because if in the first few years when you're beginning to look at information, you and I looked at information where?
Well,
Books.
well, we only have the Encyclopedia Britannica,
right? And occasionally TV.
and a bit of Blue Peter.
Yes, right? And at controlled hours.
Yeah.
Today, 24/7,
Yeah.
non-stop. And that's, how can we be surprised? So yes, the genie is out of the bottle when it comes to that. If you're specifically going back to pupils with, similar to when I was going through this in school, with learning difficulties who just couldn't access the curriculum, you're increasing the speed in which that information is getting to them. So we're overstimulating. Why aren't we teaching critical thinking? Why aren't we teaching self-regulation? And this, for me, is now become a matter of, I don't think we're at survival point yet, so I don't want to over-dramatize it, but we're close. And unless we begin to teach pupils how to self-regulate, unless we teach concepts around metacognition, around awareness, around communication skills on a human-to-human level, where will they go?
It's an interesting thing because we often talk about in these podcasts with different people. We look at things like the arts and sport as well. You talked your escape, the way you found yourself was through tennis. But we look at things like, if you look at drama, you look at music, you look at the sort of anything, just creative art, painting,
Yes.
any of those things that are they're away from the usual educational, all the boxes that have got to be ticked, but they allow young people, this is in my opinion, they allow young people to maybe find a path through those things that they don't understand because we need to stimulate creativity.
Agreed. I think we're going to see a rise in that, and I'm an optimist on that front. I think we are going to see a newfound love of the arts, of the creatives, especially as adults. Now, I'm hoping that will seep through to the curriculum in the early years, because if I can fall in love with drawing, if I can fall in love with creative exercises, if I really find myself in art and drama and music, that's where my passion's going to be, is using these, our hands, to build, to make, to create, and to innovate, because that's what's got us here,
Yeah.
right? So I do think and certainly from a global picture, while we're seeing the massive rise in AI, what we're also seeing is an even, I don't know if it's even faster, but I think we're seeing a slightly equal rise in our need to just go inward and really find out who we are and what makes us tick. And my argument in all of this is, can we do this in year 4, 5, and 6? Because if we can begin to start working with individuals and young people in early years, in the primary years, and into the secondary years, on really helping them identify who they are, how they learn, their strengths, their areas of improvement, they begin to, dare I say this somewhat optimistically, um, not only begin to fall in love with learning, but begin to fall in love with finding out who they are as individuals, as opposed to the escape of getting the phone out and doing the doomsday scrolling exercise.
We talk about mindfulness. A
Right.
few years ago, I didn't even know that word existed.
When we were in school, back
Who
then,
talked about mindfulness? I mean, I think the things we did in school, sometimes we would stop and the teacher would read to us, and we just put you put your head down on the desk and you'd listen to,
book
chapter
clubs, reading clubs. Yeah,
reading
absolutely,
clubs.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, how much do you see that through the course of your work? How much do you see if you bring something like that in, if you suggest something like that to a young person who's struggling? How are they accepting of that?
They are, and then the vehicle in which they're looking to read are YouTube shorts and TikTok videos and reading on the phone. So, yes, I know I need to read. I need to educate myself. I need to learn about the world. Where do I go to learn about the world?
Yeah.
It's not The Economist or the FT or any newspaper or anything like that. It's on the phone. And I think, unfortunately or fortunately, I mean, it's a pro and a con, it's here. But a really interesting point on, whenever, if it's me personally or through any of the work we do in schools, coaching an individual on how to get better at learning, it's revision guides, it's textbooks, it's learning how to process information, not have the information processed for you in a way suited to the algorithmic activity of a social media platform. That's engineered.
Yeah.
That's not natural. You've got a page of notes like that. Are you able to learn that? Are you able to dissect key pieces of information? And that, for me, has been the I mean, shouting and screaming from the rooftops for nearly 15 years now, that we need to be able to start to teach pupils how to learn these baseline skills very early on.
Because that's the key to anything in life, isn't it? You've got to have those. We've got to have those skills. So, just talk me through when your first approach to go, and is it purely schools that you'll go into, or places of education? When your first approach to go in, what are you seeing? What's the first thing that you're noticing?
So, yeah, it's mostly places of education. So schools, colleges, most recently prisons. And genuinely, always the first point of call is, we have 60 underperforming pupils over here, or we have 120 over here that need to improve in their science. It's always a discussion about improving academic results. And my first port of call in all of this is really based on, through the assessments that we have, is to say, well, look, irrespective of background, where they've come from, previous results, can we unify pupil voice? And can we get to a point where, through a base set of questions, we can get everyone on the same playing field?
And are you taking those particular pupils out of their classroom setting?
During the assessment phase?
Yes.
No, that will be done. Schools will arrange that during either a break time or any spare lessons that they have in school. They do it for 20 minutes. It's done online, and once they've done it, we then go to the school and say, here's the lay of the land. and we present the data back to senior leadership teams. The difference in all of this, and this is just not sort of me, it's not just me and my assessment tool, it's really from, again, just 30,000 feet, looking at how do we define risk and how do we define what we call either a high-risk pupil, a low-risk pupil, a moderate-risk pupil. And my approach in all of this is risk. We need to change the way we're defining risk. And if a pupil, and we look at really two things over here, is are they intellectually ready to learn? Do they have the skills to be able to learn information? And two, are they emotionally ready and resilient to sustain that? And they're always the two guiding metrics that I use. And it will be one or the other. And that's where, yes, it sounds simplistic, but what good data should do is simplify things. And I've yet met a pupil or worked with a pupil where there literally has been an imbalance in one or the other, right? So if I'm too emotional and I'm looking at the area of a trapezium like I did in school, and for me, it was a phobic response and a meltdown, how am I ever going to have the intellectual ability to learn it? I can't. So I need to reduce that. Equally, if I'm at a point where that's the other way, and I'm looking at a piece of work and I'm so under pressure, I'm so intellectually stimulated, so it's a balance. And that's that balance that we try to achieve in every young person, is to have a balance of intellectual readiness and emotional resilience. And that doesn't necessarily involve major changes or additional time on the area they're struggling in. It's carefully finding out from them, capturing their voices and opinions carefully, and learning really how they learn.
And then how do you then work with those teachers, educators? How do you then bring them? I take it you're taking pupils to one side and you're working with them, and then how do you bring in? So in a sense, what I'm trying to say is, it kind of almost becomes the norm for that pupil. You're not singling them out, because that is quite a difficult
Oh,
thing for them as well.
So no, that we don't single them out in any way. So in essence, there's three stages that then follow from there. Once the assessment's completed, we then match, and my system that I've created does this, is I've built now over 6,000 individualized learning resources. If the child turns around and says, I'm exhausted, I'm not sleeping, every time I'm trying to read my science, I get overwhelmed and I can't read it, and I'm handing in homework late. We form a profile of who they are, but most importantly, the child signs the profile off. The pupil does. No one else. Is this you? Is this accurate? Do you want to create this change? Tick in the box. Yes, I do. They click yes on the system.
So it's giving them the
Agency,
control.
power,
Yeah.
empowerment, but most importantly, self-leadership, right? You said this. Miss didn't say it. Mum didn't say it. The cat, the dog, no one said it. You said it. So as a result of that, click the button or say, actually, you know what? I didn't answer it correctly. I need to do it again. Then we have a series of pupils who just purely use the online system because they're not really at the risk indicator that requires some face-to-face support. We have a second group that then me and my team work with through dedicated lessons in the school. And then step number 3, we're a Ofqual regulated diploma. So we train members of staff in schools to be able to then administer this in schools. The system itself fits very seamlessly. And this has been the harder part of the mission, is to say it's no longer good enough to teach the material without teaching how to learn the material. So in most of our sort of flagship pioneering schools, we've gone in and trained the entire teaching body on sets of skills which are specific to the subject. So when they're teaching it, they're also dedicating a 15 to 20 minute window to teach the pupil how to learn it. And for me, that's been the missing piece. So, I mean, you can remember this when you were in school. There's subjects you did well in, subjects you didn't do well in, the subjects you enjoyed, subjects you didn't enjoy. And really the difference in all of that is, for me, am I really understanding what the teacher's teaching me, and am I remembering it? The remembering bit and the understanding bit will boil down to about 15 minutes. So this isn't a complicated problem to fix. It is very fixable, and most of what we're seeing today, and I've sort of prepared just a list of facts here around the enormity of the challenge.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of those because yeah, I was saying you and I, we are paper people. We're sitting here with paper in front of us now, and I can see that you've got yeah.
Well, so
Well, it's pretty large. It's a pretty large list. What's on that
it's
list?
just a subject I'm so passionate about,
Yeah.
right? And often we look at there's no money and there's no will and there's the problem here and there's an issue here. But if we look at just some of the facts that I've got here around the fact that we've got nearly over 1.7 million pupils in England identified as special educational needs, 500,000 pupils roughly, I think it may be even more now, are on EHCPs, but funding's been increasing significantly since 2012 to 2013, a lot. So what's if something is going wrong, what is going wrong?
When you say funding's increasing, but is that funding hitting the right places?
Is it hitting the right places, number one? And number two, are we doing the right things with the money? And that's the big question that I have. And I often think support is locked behind diagnosis rather than need. And early intervention is often talked about, and I've been talking about it for years. But often what we find is crisis is what gets funded. We can start to prevent a lot of these challenges through varying the way we are assessing and intervening in years 4, 5, and 6. Most importantly, then the transition years. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we preparing young people to pass exams, or are we preparing young people to do well after the exams? And is there a way we can do both?
And both those things are preparing young people for life.
Yeah.
Oh
Because
gosh.
life is learning and learning is
Yeah.
life, right? We never stop.
Well, I'll tell you, we are. I'm going to admit this today to people listening. I am officially a pensioner. I'm 67. No, I'm 66 years of age actually, and I learnt something today. I learnt that on my car there's a little button, and you push that little button on the car, and what it does, it means that I stick to the speed limit. And it actually changes. So when it said 20 miles an hour in London, the car did down to
Easier to drive, isn't it? Yeah,
it
no,
was revolutionary for me today. So, at any
brilliant.
age, we can learn. We have to education isn't just inside four walls in a school. It goes far, far beyond that.
If we have a good experience with learning. And that's my, especially with the sort of topic we're speaking about today. If we've got pupils today who are having really negative experiences with learning, uh, but not happy in the environment in which they're learning in, and constantly under pressure with being tested in areas that they struggle with in the first place, what message or what labels are they forming about? Forget the labels they're being given because of their learning challenges. What labels are they forming in their own minds? What's the identity crisis? I often talk about the hidden curriculum. What's the hidden curriculum that they are playing out in their minds every night when they're not sleeping? And that's what we need to get to the bottom of. And that's been my sort of argument for the last 15 years, is to say we've got the school curriculum, but then we've got the hidden curriculum that's happening inside the child. And we need to shift our focus to that.
And that's also just about sometimes just plain old communication.
Listening.
Listening.
Yeah.
I think every single podcast that I have been a part of for the Sen Network, every single one, listening comes into it, and here we are. Let's go back to all that, the social media. So much of that is listening, but is overwhelming the amount you've got to listen to,
and very carefully engineered through
yeah,
really scientific algorithmic activity.
yeah.
Do I feel heard? Do I feel valued?
Yeah.
And if every child can walk into a classroom somewhat feeling heard and valued, that correlates into attainment.
Yeah.
With it's proven. I tend not to avoid to say 100%, 100%, 100%, but forget it, 110%. We have to take this a step back and say we are in control of this, we can solve this, and it starts fundamentally with the pupil.
So we ask all our guests that come in to give us 3 key takeaways, 3 things that you'd like people to take away from our conversation. But I'm sort of also thinking, are there 3 things that maybe you want to see you want to see a change. And how would you bring about that change? And I've thrown lots at you there, so you can choose. Actually, you can do 3 things you'd like to take away, but I'm saying I actually want to hear from you saying what you want to change.
My biggest one, and I think about this every single day, that if I had the magic wand or I had the button to be able to go, here it is. Number one, I've written these down. So number one is invest in early insight, not late stage crisis intervention. And I think I've said that a few times now. And specifically talking about SEND is we do a lot of work with special educational needs departments with our work is really redesign learning itself to reduce SEND demand rather than continually expanding specialist provision. And number 3, embed SEND understanding across the entire school. We and most of the innovators we read about had some form of special educational need. What I fear the most is if we do not prioritize this as the single biggest priority in education over the next decade, we will create a lost generation of geniuses. And that's my call, my plea to the government, to all of the phenomenal school leaders around the country, is we need to make this mainstream. There is an entire generation of potential geniuses out there who are sitting in class today who are feeling like school isn't right for them, feeling like they cannot learn, are being labeled consistently. Let's change that. So for me, if they were the 3 things, even though I have a list of 300 with me, but we'd be here for a week, they would be the 3 things I would try and do.
And listening to this, I know, and viewing this as well, are many incredible people who are SEND practitioners who that you're probably singing from the same hymn.
Superheroes.
Yeah, they are, and they're just incredible people, and they need the love and support from everyone all around, including government. Anyway, Dr. Tej Samani, thank you.
Thank you.
feel
Thanks
we
for
are
having
tip
me.
of the iceberg. I can tell you with this conversation today.
Wow, it's already been 50. It's just
Oh my goodness!
felt
Now,
like 5 minutes.
oh, don't. Now, for anything that we've talked about today, and you can access the show notes as well. All you need to do is simply head to our website, and actually you can leave comments there as well. We love some comments, so please do that as well. You can also discover the wide variety of topics that we have discussed across these podcasts. And until next time, you've been listening to the SEND Network podcast. And if you want to find out more about us, as I said, it's send-network.co.uk, and you can discover all sorts there as well. I'm Georgie Green, and thank you for joining us today.